Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the reason someone changes everything. The wind cuts through the empty street like a warning no one listens to, sharp and cold, carrying the faint smell of rain on concrete as neon lights flicker above a half-empty diner on the edge of downtown Chicago, the kind of place where people don't stay longer than they have to. And inside, Lily Monroe wipes down the same counter for the third time, her hands moving out of habit more than purpose, her reflection faint in the glass. Tired eyes, worn jacket, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from one bad day but from too many in a row. And when the bell above the door jingles, she looks up, expecting another late-night customer, maybe someone ordering coffee they won't finish, but instead, she sees him, standing just inside the doorway, shoulders slightly hunched, jacket soaked through, hair damp and clinging to his forehead, like he walked miles just to end up nowhere. And for a moment, he doesn't move, like he's deciding whether he belongs there at all, and Lily watches him. The way you watch something fragile, unsure if stepping closer will make it disappear. Kitchen's closing in 10, she says, her voice soft but steady, the kind of tone she's learned to use with people who look like they might walk away if the world pushes too hard. He nods, slow, almost apologetic, and steps forward, taking a seat at the far end of the counter, not looking at the menu, not looking at her, just staring at his hands like they might explain something he hasn't figured out yet. And there's something about the silence that settles between them, heavier than the usual late-night quiet, the kind that makes you notice things you normally ignore, like the way his fingers tremble slightly, or how he exhales like he's been holding his breath for too long. Lily glances at the clock, then at the nearly empty tip jar beside the register, then back at him, and for a second, she hesitates. The way people do when they've learned to protect what little they have left. But then she reaches under the counter, pulls out a small paper bag, and places it gently in front of him. It's not much, she says, avoiding his eyes like it makes the moment easier. But it's warm. He looks at the bag, then at her, confusion flickering across his face. I didn't order anything, he says quietly, his voice rough, not from anger, but from something closer to disbelief. Lily shrugs, a small, almost careless movement that hides more than it shows. You don't look like someone who should leave hungry, she replies, and for a second, neither of them speaks, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. And then, slowly, like he's afraid the moment might break if he moves too fast, he reaches out and takes the bag, his fingers brushing against hers for just a fraction of a second, and something shifts, small, almost invisible, but real, and he exhales, softer this time. Thank you, he says, and it's not just polite, it's something deeper, something that sounds like it's been a long time since he's had to say those words and meant them. Lily nods, already turning away, already pretending it didn't matter as much as it did. But as she grabs her coat from the hook behind the counter, she glances back at him one last time, watching as he opens the bag carefully, like it's something worth protecting. And outside, the rain finally starts to fall, steady and quiet, as if the city itself is trying to wash something clean, and Lily steps out into the cold night, pulling her jacket tighter around her, not knowing that inside that diner, the man she just helped is holding on to more than just a meal, and not knowing that this one moment, this simple choice she almost didn't make, is already beginning to change everything. The rain follows Lily Monroe all the way down the block, soaking through the thin fabric of her jacket until it clings to her arms, cold and heavy. But she keeps walking like she always does, head down, steps steady, counting cracks in the sidewalk like it somehow keeps her grounded. And by the time she reaches the old parking lot behind the closed hardware store, her shoes are damp, her fingers numb, and the city feels quieter, like it has already forgotten her. She stops beside the faded blue sedan that has not moved in months, glancing around out of habit before unlocking the door, the soft click barely audible under the rain. And inside, the air smells faintly of fabric softener and stale coffee, a strange mix of comfort and survival. She pulls the door shut, exhales slowly, and for a moment just sits there, letting the silence settle, her shoulders dropping as if the world has finally loosened its grip. The back seat is neatly arranged with folded blankets, a small pillow, and a plastic storage bin that holds everything she owns, and she reaches into it, pulling out a worn photograph, the edges curled from time, her thumb brushing over it gently. I am still trying, she murmurs, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping against the windshield. And then she sets it aside, leaning her head back, closing her eyes for just a second longer than she should, because rest has become something she has to steal instead of something she is given. Across the city, in a place where the lights never flicker and the floors reflect every step, the man from the diner stands in front of a wall of glass that stretches from floor to ceiling, the skyline glowing beneath him in a way that feels distant rather than beautiful, his reflection sharp now, clean suit, dry hair, every detail in place as if the night before never happened. Alexander Cole adjusts the cuff of his shirt slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes linger on something that is not there, something quieter, something that does not belong in rooms like this. A voice behind him breaks the stillness. "You disappeared again," his assistant says, not accusing, just stating a pattern she has learned not to question too much. He does not turn right away, his fingers brushing lightly over the edge of the paper bag sitting on the table beside him, slightly crumpled now, but carefully placed, like it holds more than what was inside it. "I needed to see something for myself," he replies, his voice calm, measured, but there is a weight under it that does not match the usual confidence people expect from him. She steps closer, glancing at the bag, then back at him. "And did you find what you were looking for?" she asks, and for a moment, he does not answer, his mind drifting back to the way Lily avoided eye contact, the way she gave without asking questions, without hesitation, without knowing anything about him. "I found someone who did not need to know anything to do the right thing," he says finally, his gaze steady now, something decided settling behind it. His assistant studies him for a second, then nods slightly, already understanding that whatever this is, it matters more than the meetings waiting on his schedule. "Do you want me to look into her?" she asks, and he shakes his head, a small, deliberate movement. "Not yet," he says, picking up the paper bag, his grip gentle, almost careful. "If it was real, it will happen again." And back in the quiet parking lot, Lily pulls the blanket tighter around her shoulders, staring at the rain as it streaks down the glass, unaware that somewhere across the city, the man she helped is holding onto the moment like it was something rare, something worth finding again, and for the first time in a long while, he is not thinking about numbers or deals or power. He is thinking about a girl who had nothing and still chose to give. Morning arrives without ceremony, just a pale gray light slipping through the cracks of the city as Lily Monroe wakes to the sound of a distant bus rumbling past, her breath faint against the cold air inside the car. She sits up slowly, pulling the blanket from her shoulders and folding it with practiced care, every movement deliberate, every item returned to its place, because order is the only thing she fully controls anymore. She checks her phone out of habit, no new messages, no missed calls, nothing waiting for her, and she exhales softly before stepping out into the chill, the ground still damp from the night before, her shoes pressing lightly against the pavement as she stretches her arms, trying to shake off the stiffness, and for a moment, she just stands there, looking at the sky like she is asking it for something it has never promised. Then she moves, because staying still has never helped her, back across the city. Alexander Cole sits at the long conference table surrounded by polished wood and quiet tension. Voices drift around him. Executives discussing projections and quarterly strategies, numbers rising and falling on screens that reflect in their eyes. But he does not follow the conversation, not fully, his fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table as his mind replays something far simpler, far quieter, the way a girl had pushed a paper bag toward him without expecting anything in return. "Alexander," someone says, pulling him back, "we need your approval on the expansion timeline." He glances at the documents briefly, then signs his name without hesitation, his attention already shifting again. "Reschedule the afternoon meetings," he says suddenly, his tone calm, but leaving no room for argument. A few heads lift in surprise. His assistant pauses, pen hovering above her notebook. "You have a full calendar," she reminds him carefully, and he nods once, standing as he adjusts his jacket. "Then clear it," he replies, already moving toward the door, because something in him has decided that numbers can wait, but moments like that cannot. By late morning, the diner hums with a different kind of energy, sunlight cutting through the windows, catching dust in the air as Lily moves between tables, balancing plates and coffee cups with a rhythm that feels almost automatic. her smile small but genuine, the kind that comes from habit more than ease. She wipes her hands on her apron, glancing at the clock as she calculates how many more hours she needs to get through before the next shift. And when the bell above the door rings again, she does not look up right away, just calls out, "Sit anywhere you like." Her voice steady, but something shifts when the room goes quiet for a fraction of a second longer than usual, and she turns, her gaze landing on him, standing just inside the doorway, dry this time, but dressed simply, a plain jacket, dark jeans, nothing that draws attention, nothing that reveals anything, except the way he looks at her like he recognizes something no one else sees. And for a second, Lily freezes, not because she knows who he is, but because she remembers the feeling from the night before, something unspoken, something that lingers. "You came back," she says before. She can stop herself, her voice softer now, less guarded, and he nods slightly, stepping closer, his eyes steady but careful. "I thought I should." He replies, the words simple, but the meaning heavier than they sound. She gestures toward the counter, motioning for him to sit, and as he takes the same seat as before, she reaches for a menu, then pauses, setting it down again with a faint smile. "Let me guess," she says quietly. "You are not here for the menu." And he almost smiles, just enough to show that something inside him has shifted too. "No," he says, his voice low but certain. "I am here because of you." And for the first time in a long while, Lily does not immediately look away. For a moment, the world inside the diner seems to slow, like even the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation step back to give space to something neither of them fully understands. Lily Monroe shifts her weight slightly, one hand resting on the counter as she studies him more carefully now, noticing the difference from last night, the steadiness in his posture, the way his eyes do not drift or avoid, but hold, present and intentional. And yet there is still something familiar in him, something that does not quite belong to the polished world she imagines exists beyond places like this. "That is a strange reason to come back," she says, her tone light, but edged with curiosity. And he nods once, accepting that without defense. "It is," he admits, his fingers loosely interlaced on the counter. "But I do not think you expected anything when you helped me." She lets out a small breath, glancing down as she reaches for a coffee mug, pouring without asking because some things feel understood without words. "People do not usually expect things from strangers," she replies, setting the mug in front of him, the steam rising softly between them. "Not the ones who are just trying to get through the day." He watches the way she moves, efficient but gentle, like every action has purpose even if no one is paying attention. "And you are just trying to get through the day," he repeats, not as a question, but as something he is beginning to understand. Lily gives a faint smile, the kind that holds more truth than comfort. "Most days," she says quietly, then leans back slightly against the counter, crossing her arms as if that creates a boundary she needs. "So what about you?" she adds, tilting her head just enough to show she is not going to let the conversation stay one-sided. "You do not look like someone who gets lost easily." There is a pause, subtle but real, and for a second, something flickers behind his eyes. Not hesitation exactly, but calculation, like he is deciding which version of the truth to offer. "I am not," he says finally, his voice even. "But sometimes I need to see things without being recognized for what I am." Lily raises an eyebrow slightly. The answer not quite clear, but not entirely suspicious either. "That sounds like a luxury," she replies, and there is no bitterness in her tone, just observation, and he almost smiles again, because she is not wrong. "Maybe it is," he says, lifting the mug slightly before setting it back down, untouched. "Or maybe it is the only way to know what is real." She studies him for a second longer, then shakes her head lightly, a soft exhale escaping her lips. "Real is easy," she says, tapping the counter once with her fingers. "You either have something to give, or you do not." And he leans forward just a fraction, drawn in by the simplicity of it. "And what if someone has everything, but still does not know how to give it?" he asks, his voice quieter now, less guarded, and for the first time, Lily hesitates, not because she does not have an answer, but because the question feels heavier than it should. "Then maybe they are looking in the wrong place," she says slowly, meeting his gaze again, and something settles between them, not tension, not ease, but something in between, something unfinished. And across the diner, a man at a nearby table glances over, watching the exchange with mild curiosity before returning to his meal, unaware that the conversation unfolding a few feet away is quietly shifting the direction of two lives. And as the clock ticks forward and the day continues like it always does, neither Lily nor Alexander realizes that this second meeting is no accident anymore. It is a choice, one that is beginning to pull them both into something neither of them planned, but neither of them is walking away from either. The minutes stretch quietly between them, not awkward, not rushed, just present, as if neither Lily Monroe nor Alexander Cole feels the need to fill every second with words. And for Lily, that alone is unusual, because silence has always meant absence, distance, or something about to leave. But this feels different, steadier, like something choosing to stay. She reaches for a cloth and begins wiping the counter again, more out of habit than necessity, her eyes occasionally flicking toward him, measuring, not suspicious, just aware. "You still have not eaten," she says after a while, nodding slightly toward the untouched coffee, and he follows her glance, almost surprised by it himself. "I guess I am not as hungry as I thought," he replies, though there is a faint contradiction in his tone, because hunger is not always about food. Lily lets out a small breath that could almost be a laugh, setting the cloth aside. "That happens," she says, leaning her elbows lightly on the counter now, less guarded than before. "Sometimes you think you need one thing, and it turns out to be something else." He watches her closely, the way her words come without effort, without pretense. And for someone who has spent years listening to people speak carefully, strategically, it feels disarming in the best way. "And what do you need?" he asks, not casually, but with a quiet sincerity that catches her off guard. She pauses, her gaze dropping briefly to the surface of the counter, her fingers tracing a faint scratch in the wood, a small imperfection that no one else would notice. "I need a break that lasts longer than a few hours," she admits softly, then shrugs as if it is not a big thing, as if it is something she has already accepted will not happen anytime soon. But that is not really how things work. He leans back slightly, absorbing that, the simplicity of her answer hitting harder than any complicated explanation could, because she does not ask for much, and yet even that feels out of reach. "What if it could?" he says, the words leaving his mouth before he fully considers how they sound, and she looks up at him again, this time with a hint of skepticism, not defensive, just grounded. "People do not just get breaks like that," she replies, her tone calm but certain. "They earn them, or they wait for them, or they learn how to live without them." He nods slowly, understanding more than she realizes, because he has seen every version of that truth from the other side, from a world where breaks can be bought, scheduled, controlled, but never truly felt. "Maybe," he says quietly, "or maybe sometimes they are given, and the hard part is believing you are allowed to take them." Lily studies him for a second, something in his voice making her hesitate, like there is more behind his words than he is saying. But before she can respond, the diner door opens again, a group of customers stepping in, their laughter filling the space and breaking the moment just enough to remind them both of where they are. Lily straightens slightly, slipping back into her role with practiced ease, grabbing menus and greeting them with a polite smile. But as she moves away, she glances back at him once, just for a second, and he is still there, watching her, not in a way that feels intrusive, but in a way that feels intentional, like he is not just seeing her, but choosing to. And as the noise of the diner rises again, Alexander reaches into his pocket slowly, his fingers brushing against something small and rectangular. He pulls it out, just enough to see the edge of a sleek, black business card, his name printed in clean, sharp letters, a symbol of everything he has built, everything he could reveal in an instant. And for a moment, he considers it, the weight of truth sitting quietly in his hand. But then he slides it back into his pocket, his decision clear, because whatever this is, whatever she gave him that night, and whatever is beginning to grow between them now, it is not something he wants to change too soon, not something he wants to risk breaking before it has a chance to become real. And across the room, Lily carries a tray of plates, her movement steady, unaware that the man she helped is holding back a truth that could change everything. And for now, both of them are standing at the edge of something neither of them can fully see yet, but neither of them is stepping away from. By the time the afternoon light begins to fade, the diner has settled into that in-between quiet where the rush has passed, but the night has not yet begun, and Lily Monroe finally slows down, her steps less hurried as she refills a coffee pot and sets it back on the warmer, her shoulders relaxing just enough to notice how tired she actually feels. She glances toward the counter almost without thinking, and he is still there, not checking his phone, not looking around, just sitting with a kind of patience she does not quite understand, like he is not waiting for time to pass, but choosing to stay exactly where he is. And something about that makes her pause again, because people do not usually stay without a reason. "You must not have a busy day," she says as she approaches, her tone lighter now, almost teasing, and he looks up at her, that same steady gaze. "Not today," he replies, and there is a quiet certainty in it that suggests it is not an accident. She leans against the counter. Again, closer this time, less distance between them than before. "That sounds like a choice," she says, and he nods once. "It is," he answers simply, and for a moment, that is enough, the honesty of it settling between them in a way that feels easier than explanations. Lily picks up a napkin and folds it absent-mindedly, her fingers moving with a kind of rhythm that reveals more about her state of mind than her words do. "Most people do not choose to spend their free time in a place like this," she says, glancing around the diner, the chipped edges of tables, the flicker of an old light in the corner, the quiet signs of a place that has seen better days. And he follows her gaze briefly before returning to her. "Most people have not found a reason to," he says, and she lets out a small breath, something between a sigh and a laugh. "You are not very subtle. You know that," she replies, but there is no discomfort in her voice. Just a growing awareness that whatever this is, it is not something she can easily define. He shifts slightly in his seat, leaning forward just enough to lower his voice, as if the conversation has become something private without either of them deciding it should be. "I am not trying to be," he admits, and that honesty lands differently this time. Deeper, because it is not polished or calculated. It is simple, direct, and she studies him for a second longer, as if trying to place him somewhere in a world that has never quite worked in her favor. "So, what happens when you are done?" she asks, her tone softer now, more curious than guarded. "When you have seen whatever it is you came to see." He does not answer right away, his eyes holding hers in a way that makes the question feel heavier than it sounded, because the truth is not something he has fully decided yet. "Then I decide what to do with it," he says finally, and she nods slowly, accepting the answer even if it does not explain everything, because she has learned that not everything needs to be explained to be understood. A few seconds pass, quiet but not empty, and then Lily straightens, pushing herself lightly off the counter as she glances toward the back, where the manager is counting receipts, her shift nearly over, and she hesitates, just for a moment, before looking back at him. "I get off in 10 minutes, she says, the words leaving her mouth before she fully thinks them through, and his expression shifts, not surprised, but attentive, and he prompts gently, giving her space to decide what she means. She takes a small breath, then shrugs lightly, as if making it seem less important than it feels. "There is a place down the street that makes decent coffee. Not diner coffee, actual coffee," she says, and for the first time, something unmistakable appears in his expression, something warmer, something that has been building quietly since the night before. "I would like that," he replies, and as Lily nods, turning away to finish her last few tasks. Neither of them says anything more, but something has already shifted again, because this is no longer just a moment or a coincidence. It is a step, a choice, and outside, the sky deepens into early evening. The city lights beginning to glow one by one, unaware that two people from completely different worlds are about to walk into the same night together, not knowing where it will lead, but no longer standing still. The bell above the diner door rings softly as Lily Monroe steps out into the evening, the cool air brushing against her face in a way that feels different now, lighter somehow, like the weight of the day has shifted just enough to notice. She pulls her jacket tighter around her shoulders, glancing briefly over her shoulder as Alexander Cole follows a step behind, his presence steady but unintrusive, and for a moment they stand side by side on the sidewalk, the city moving around them in its usual rhythm, cars passing, distant voices blending into the hum of the night. But there is something quieter between them, something that does not belong to the noise. It is only a few blocks, she says, nodding down the street. Her voice casual but carrying a hint of something unspoken, and he nods in return, falling into step beside her without hesitation, their pace unhurried, matching without effort. As if they have done this before, though they have not, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, stretching and shifting as they walk, and Lily keeps her gaze forward at first, her hands tucked into her pockets, but after a few steps, she glances at him, studying him in a way she has not allowed herself to before. "You still have not told me your name," she says, the realization coming late, but landing clearly, and he looks at her, a small pause before he answers, not out of uncertainty, but out of choice. "Alexander," he says, his voice even, and she repeats it softly, as if testing how it feels. "Alexander," then nods once. "Lily," she adds, though he already knows, and something about the exchange makes it feel official in a way that matters more than it should. They continue walking, the distance closing quietly beneath their steps, and the small coffee shop comes into view, its warm lights glowing through the windows, a contrast to the darker street outside. Lily pushes the door open, the faint sound of a bell greeting them as they step inside. And the scent of fresh coffee fills the air, richer than the diner, more deliberate. She gestures toward a small table near the window, and they sit across from each other, the space between them now defined, but not distant. A barista approaches, and Lily orders without looking at the menu. "2 coffees," she says, then glances at him briefly, giving him a chance to change it, but he shakes his head slightly. "That is perfect," he replies, and when the barista leaves, the quiet returns, softer. Here, less crowded, more intentional. Lily rests her hands around the edge of the table, her fingers lightly tapping once before going still. "So, Alexander," she begins, her tone thoughtful now, "what exactly are you looking for?" The question hangs there, simple but direct, and he leans back slightly, considering it not as something to deflect, but something to answer carefully. "I thought I was looking for something specific," he says slowly, his gaze steady on hers. "But now I think I was just looking for something real." She watches him closely, searching for any sign that the words are rehearsed, but there is none, just a quiet honesty that feels unfamiliar but not unwelcome. "And you think you found that in a diner?" she says, a faint smile touching her lips, not mocking, just curious, and he does not hesitate this time. "I think I found it in you," he replies, and the simplicity of it catches her off guard, her breath pausing for just a second before she looks down at the table, not retreating, but processing, because no one says things like that without expecting something in return, and yet he does not ask for anything, does not lean forward or press the moment. He just sits there, letting the truth exist without pushing it further. The barista returns with their coffees, setting them down gently, the warmth rising between them again, and Lily wraps her hands around the cup, drawing in a slow breath, the heat grounding her as she looks back up at him, her expression softer now, less guarded than before. "You are not what I expected," she admits quietly, and he gives a small, almost thoughtful nod. "Neither are you," he says, and outside the window, the city continues as it always does, unaware that inside this small coffee shop, something has shifted again, something deeper this time, because this is no longer about curiosity or coincidence. It is about connection, and neither of them is pretending not to feel it anymore, even if they do not yet understand where it will lead. The warmth of the coffee lingers between them, rising in soft curls that blur the space just enough to make everything feel slightly unreal, like the world outside has faded and only this moment remains. Lily Monroe wraps her hands tighter around the cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers as she studies Alexander in silence, not because she has nothing to say, but because for the first time in a long while, she does not feel the need to rush her thoughts, and that alone unsettles her more than she expects. "People usually want something," she says finally, her voice quiet but steady, her eyes lifting to meet his again. When they say things like that, he does not look away, does not interrupt, just listens, and that makes her continue. "They want attention, or control, or to feel better about themselves." She pauses, her grip tightening slightly around the cup, So what do you want? The question lands softly, but it carries weight, the kind that does not demand an answer but deserves an honest one. And Alexander leans forward just a fraction, his hands resting loosely on the table, open, unguarded. I want to understand why you did it, he says, and she blinks, caught off guard not by the question itself, but by the way he asks it, like it matters more than anything else he could be doing. Did what? She replies, though she already knows, and he nods slightly, his gaze steady. You had almost nothing, and you still gave it away, he says, his voice calm but carrying something deeper beneath it, something personal, something that has not let him go since that night. Lily exhales slowly, her eyes drifting down to the surface of the table again, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup as she considers her answer, not carefully, but honestly, because I know what it feels like when no one does, she says after a moment, her voice softer. Now, less guarded, and when she looks back up, there is no hesitation in her expression, just truth. There was a time when I needed help, and people looked right through me like I was not even there. She continues, her words simple but carrying the weight of something lived. So I decided I would not be that person, not if I could help it. The silence that follows is not empty, it is full, filled with something neither of them names, but both of them feel, and Alexander nods slowly, absorbing every word, because this is what he came looking for, not the act itself, but the reason behind it, the part that cannot be faked or replicated. That is rare, he says quietly, and she gives a small, almost dismissive shake of her head. It should not be, she replies, and for a second, something shifts in him, something deeper than curiosity, something closer to respect, maybe even something more. But before he can respond, his phone vibrates against the table, the sharp sound cutting through. The moment like a reminder of a world he has not fully left behind. He glances down at the screen, the name flashing briefly, and for the first time since he walked into the diner, there is a visible tension in his expression, not panic, not fear, but responsibility, the kind that does not wait. Lily notices it immediately, the way his posture changes, the way his attention splits, and she leans back slightly, giving him space without saying it out loud. You should take it, she says, her tone neutral but understanding, and he hesitates, just for a second, then shakes his head, flipping the phone face down on the table. It can wait, he replies, but the words do not fully convince even him, and she studies him for a moment longer, something clicking into place in her mind, not the full picture, but enough to feel the edges of it. No, she says gently, her voice firm in a way that surprises even her. It cannot. And their eyes meet again, and this time, there is something different. There, something sharper, more aware, because for the first time, Lily is not just seeing the man in front of her, she is starting to sense the world behind him, the one he has not shown her yet. And Alexander knows it too, the moment stretching just long enough to feel like a turning point, because whatever comes next, whatever truth follows, this is the last second before everything begins to change. Alexander Cole holds her gaze for one long second, the kind of second that feels heavier than time should allow, and then he reaches for the phone, turning it over slowly as if that small movement carries more weight than it should. The screen lights up again, the name still there, waiting, and he exhales quietly before stepping a few feet away from the table, his voice low as he answers. I said I would handle it tomorrow. He pauses, listening, his expression shifting from calm to something more defined, more authoritative, the kind of presence that does not belong to a man who wandered into a diner soaked from the rain. No, reschedule the board meeting. He continues, his tone firm now, controlled, and even without hearing the other side of the conversation, the shift is undeniable. It is not loud, not aggressive, just certain, the kind of certainty that comes from being listened to without question. And at the table, Lily Monroe watches quietly, her hands still, wrapped around her cup, but her eyes sharper now, more focused, because this is not a small detail. This is not something that can be explained away with vague answers. And when he ends the call and turns back toward her, there is a subtle difference in the way he carries himself, not something he intended to show, but something he can no longer fully hide. He walks back to the table, slower this time, more aware of the distance between who she thinks he is and who he actually is, and when he sits down, The silence between them feels different, not empty, but filled with something that needs to be said. Lily is the one who speaks first, her voice calm, but no longer casual. "You do not sound like someone who just wanders around looking for something real," she says, her eyes steady on his, and he nods once, not denying it, because denying it would be pointless now. "I am not," he replies, and for the first time, there is no hesitation in his voice, just truth. She leans back, slightly, her fingers loosening around the cup as she exhales slowly. "So who are you?" she asks, and the question is simple, but it lands like a line drawn between them, one that cannot be stepped around anymore. Alexander reaches into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate now, not rushed, not uncertain, and when he pulls out the card, the same one he had hidden before, he places it gently on the table between them, turning it so she can read it, the black surface catching the soft light, the lettering clean and unmistakable. Lily's eyes drop to it, and for a moment, she does not move, does not react, as if her mind needs an extra second to catch up with what she is seeing. Then she reads it, once, then again, her breath slowing instead of catching, because shock for her does not look like it does for others. It looks like quiet, controlled, contained. "Alexander Cole," she says softly, almost to herself, then looks back up at him, her expression not angry, not impressed, just searching. "CEO," she adds, the word simple, but loaded, and he nods again, meeting her gaze without looking away. "I did not tell you because I wanted to see what was real," he says, his voice steady. "But there is something beneath it now, something closer to vulnerability than he is used to showing. And now you have," she replies, her tone even, and for a second, it is impossible to tell what she is thinking. She glances down at the card once more, then pushes it gently back toward him, not rejecting it, but not accepting it either. "You came into that diner like you had nothing," she says, her eyes lifting to meet his again. "And now you are telling me you have everything." There is no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact, and he leans forward slightly, his hands resting on the table, open, the same way they were before. "I have a lot," he admits, "but not the thing I found that night." And the words hang there, simple, unpolished, and completely honest. Lily studies him for a long moment, her gaze steady, weighing not the title, not the wealth, but the truth in what he is saying, and slowly, something in her expression softens, not completely, not all at once, but enough to show that she is not walking away. "You still ate the food," she says quietly, a small detail, but not an insignificant one, and he almost smiles, just a little. "I did," he replies, and she nods once, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it carries meaning, because for Lily, truth is not in what someone claims to be, it is in what they choose to do.